Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start this meeting. Thank you all for coming. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that some commissioners, staff, and the public are attending remotely via Zoom, by phone, or also on site here at the Unified Government. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is observing knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and its current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. I will now call the meeting in order. Clerk.
Roll call. Ramirez,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Kane. We have an absence memo. Markley. Here. Stites,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Bynum, Burrows, Johnson. Here. McKiernan,
Here.
Garner.
Here. The invocation is being given tonight by Commissioner Harold Johnson of Faith Deliverance Church of God in Christ, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all stand.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you for bringing us together tonight as commission and mayor. God, we ask you to give us your divine guidance, order our steps, give us, Lord, a mind to work together in a mode of civility in a way that is productive for all of our citizens that call Wyandotte County home. We pray this in your name, Christ, our Lord. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I ask the clerk if there's any revisions to tonight's agenda.
There are no revisions to tonight's agenda, Mayor.
Thank you. That takes us right into the administrator's agenda. And tonight, as you notice, we are modifying the order of the meeting to allow the items of the administrator's agenda to be first as far as presentations are concerned. As I've stated previously, the intern county administrator has been conducting an audit of the organization and is ready to provide the initial updates from our auditors to the commission as well as to the public. This information is valuable to the community and feeds into our continued budget discussions, as well as how we can best provide services to our citizens here in Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas. Therefore, I have elected to address the items at the beginning of this meeting, and I will now turn it over to our administrator to start with the resolutions.
Cheryl Harrison-Lee, Interim County Administrator. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the Commission. The first item that we will have on the administrator's agenda is the resolution for the notice of intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And I will turn that over to our Chief Counsel Brown for that item.
Thank you, Administrator. This is Misty Brown, Chief Counsel for the Unified Government. I have Jeff Conway in my office here to present the item along with Debbie Johnsher in case any other questions could arise. So Jeff, if you will.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, Jeff Conway, legal, and it's a pretty simple resolution. It just complies with the requirements that there be some a statement of intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate by July 20th of this year. And so it states that. It also must state the date, time, and location of the hearing that would be on the intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. So that's stated in the resolution. And then the other critical pieces are the statement of the revenue neutral rate itself for both the city and the county, as well as the proposed rates as identified as in mills for the budget for both the city and the county. So all of those critical pieces are in the resolution. And so that would be the first step, is to adopt the resolution and pass that on. And then, of course, the next step would be, of course, to have the hearing itself. And that would be set for August 22nd at 7 p.m. And then once that happens, then we follow through with the Senate Bill 13 process, and there would be the hearing. There would be the passage of the resolution, presumably at the end of that hearing. And then we'd move on from there. And then at the end of course, the budget would be certified finally on October of this year. So I don't want to belabor it. That's the basic idea. That's the resolution with the essential pieces in it. And that's for discussion. I believe I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Markley.
I just want to confirm the proposed maximum mill rate that's stated in here is our current rate for the city and the county. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. That was the certified rate carried over from last year. So that was locked in last year. That's correct.
If there are no other questions, I'll move to approve.
McKiernan, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. If there are no other comments, I would like to comment that that initially at the beginning of the year, I was an objection of exceeding the revenue neutral rate. I just would remind this commission as we move forward to this budget process, especially as we look in our county and in our nation, as we go headwinds into what we believe may be a recession, that we have a lot of people in Wyandotte County that are struggling, working from paycheck to paycheck, dealing with high taxes, dealing with a BPU pilot that is burdensome, not to mention the ongoing fees and take your pick that really lock a lot of our residents out of being able to utilize some of the amenities that we have in our county, and that stifle developments from the individuals that I talked to. And so let's keep those individuals in mind, those working families, and those individuals that are working hard to make ends meet. And I do have a question as well. Even though we're keeping the revenue neutral rate the same, I do believe at the beginning when we had this conversation, the tax rate from the mill levy increases that I think that were kind of broad throughout the county really is going to bring in more tax dollars to our unified government, correct?
Right. It's kind of the interplay between valuations and the mill rates. And so if you stay with the same mill rate, you're probably going to generate more revenue because of the valuations of the property. So the mill rate here for the revenue neutral rate, as expressed in here, is lower because the mill rates had to be brought down so that you are raising the same amount of revenue because the valuations had gone up. I don't know if I explained that very well, but That's in my non-budget mind, that's how I understand it.
But the bottom line is that residents will see a tax increase, correct? Unless there's action taken by this commission to counterbalance that. Is that correct?
If the mill rates stay the same, naturally the assessed valuations are going to go up, just because that's just the way it is. And so that would increase the amount of revenue that comes in.
Which those revenues are generated from our taxpayers, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that in itself, without an adjustment or this commission taking that consideration, can cause a tax increase unless the mill levy is adjusted in a manner that reflects those mill increases. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and so I asked, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I do need to point out that this would set the maximum mill levies. And so it is possible to adjust it downwards, but this is the ceiling, so it would not be possible to go above these.
And that's fine, but nevertheless, unless these factors are taken in consideration in a responsible way, as it stands today, without any action on the part of this commission to drastically and responsibly lower the mill levy to offset the mill increases, taxpayers will see a substantial increase. Is that correct?
It all kind of depends on what the calculations are, but yeah, generally, yes.
Okay. And so with that being said, that's the position. I just, as we move forward in this budget process, and I'd like to just reassure the public that the decision has not been made by this commission, but I will continue to advocate for responsible tax reductions that can bring relief to the residents of Wyandotte County that have been asking for it for a long time, as well as looking at the BPU pilot and our fees, and do so in a way that I believe can be done responsibly without diminishing our essential services. One area that I'd like to see talked about as we come to the conclusion of our budget process is we need to talk about how best to identify what essential services look like for our residents. And then we need to look at streamlining our government in a way and tightening our belts as a unified government. I have not heard that conversation. It is my opinion, based on the economists that I've talked to and some experts, that continue to raise taxes in a manner that we are and continue to raise costs without looking at how we streamline this government and operate more efficiently is taking us on a path to bankruptcy, especially when we're $1.7 billion in debt between both the BPU and the unified government, with a lot of other fees, or I should say commitments that are still lingering out there. So at some point, especially going into a recession, we cannot keep expecting to raise taxes on our residents. We are taxing people out of our county and taxing poor people deeper into poverty. And so if you can hold those applause, please. So I say that that's my position. This mayor will continue to fight for responsible tax decreases. And I urge that this community share in that sentiment as you've asked me to. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1. I appreciate the comments that you're making, but I want to be crystal clear to the community that we're not setting any mill levy rate tonight. What's proposed on the table with a motion and a second is the maximum mill levy process that we go through as part of our budget efforts, setting the city and the county mill levies at the maximum level that would be allowable during this budget process. So I think we still have a lot of budget conversations left to hold, especially including what you bring forward with identifying what we might consider to be essential services, as well as possibilities for streamlining government. But we have many opportunities yet in front of us for mill levy reduction before we adopt the budget. And I just Just want to make sure that's very clear. These are not the mill levies that we're adopting. We are performing this exercise of setting the maximum mill levy. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as I read the title, I think it's pretty clear as to what we plan on doing this evening. It's the governing body's intent to levy a property tax exceeding the revenue neutral rate. And Mayor, I don't disagree with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make it clear too, revenue neutral, to my understanding, is not a tax reduction by any means. To do that, we would need to lower taxes beyond the revenue neutral. And I believe that was brought out about 8.5%. Is that correct, Ms.?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Debbie Johnsher, Deputy CFO. Yes, that's correct. Going to the revenue neutral rate would keep the tax revenue that's collected exactly the same in 2023 as it is currently in 2022.
And that was 8.5%, I believe.
I believe what you had seen earlier was about 8 mills.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I go further to say is that what we wouldn't see is a tax decrease, but the proposal and the recommendation that I brought forward with revenue neutral was to trying to prevent a tax increase on our residents, which would force us, when you talk about costs, to really bring back to our administration to basically tighten the belt, cut costs, determine what essential services are, and really fund our government at the same revenue that was approved in the current budget that we're under now. Is that correct? Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. So with that being said, I'd just like to reaffirm my commitment to that narrative and would encourage our commissioners to really think about our residents and the continued cries for both tax relief, BPU pilot relief, and looking at our fees in a way that at least can put a pressure point on these burdensome taxes and fees that we have asked for far too long, in my opinion, for our residents here in Wyandotte County to carry the burden for. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, just want to remind the community, your tax, only 46% of your tax dollar goes to us. The remainder, the USD 500, the library board, KCKCC, and if I can remember from past, they are also going to exceed their revenue neutral rate. If we lower our taxes, it's going to have a minimal effect. It needs to have all taxing jurisdictions need to work together, but we don't have that. We, as a commission, have asked for it, but nothing has come from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that comment, but I'd like to say that conversation, I believe, is still on the table with all our taxing entities. Hopefully it'll be a part of this budget process. But at the end of the day, we're the unified government. I think people in most other jurisdictions follow our lead, or at least we hope they do. And we should take the lead in making sure that we, you talk about 46%, that's almost half. And that can be impactful, especially when you're talking about mill levies that gone up and just keeping a revenue neutral rate. The unified government has the ability on our own as being the top governing body within Wyandotte County to at least start paving the way and saying, we're going to do our part to put a pressure point on, and we're going to work with these other taxing entities to move that conversation forward. So Commissioner McKernan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to remind everybody, as I do at all of our meetings, that at every meeting we come, people ask us to improve the level and quality of service delivery in terms of the services that we provide to the citizens of Wyandotte County. And just as the cost for goods and services and personnel is rising around the country, it is similarly rising for the unified government. So for us to simply provide the same level of service that we have in the past is going to cost us more money. I understand the desire to lower how much we pay. We just have to be mindful that we may not be able to provide services at the level that we want if we go that route. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would remind those that are watching that watched back in March, this mayor came with a proposal that was completely rejected by this commission in a way, to me, that really raised eyebrows with folks in this community, that came with a responsible plan that could do just that, especially when you're talking about several hundred funded employee positions where we could have found cost savings wouldn't have at all impacted essential services here in Kansas City, Kansas. Those are the types of conversations that we need to have. Those are the types of things that we need to move forward. But the bottom line is we cannot continue to put the burden of taxing our citizens and thinking that they can handle that tax burden when this is one of the poorest counties in the state of Kansas. It's irresponsible. And so I have a motion and I have a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Stites, Davis,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
No.
Townsend. Aye. McKiernan.
Aye.
Vote is 8-1. The motion carries.
Thank you. I will turn it back over to our administrator, and she will get into the items on her agenda.
Cheryl Harrison Lee, Interim County Administrator. At the onset of my term as the Interim County Administrator, I committed to evaluating the organization and identifying areas for improvement while highlighting and capitalizing on the strengths that will benefit our community. As such, we have been in the process of looking at our organization to find ways to improve the unified government as a place to work, enhance our community outcomes through quality services, and leverage our centers of excellence as an organization to the benefit of everyone across Wyandotte County. There are 3 areas I'd like to highlight tonight: an overall organizational review, a high level of finance, and human resources. During the first 100 days, I spent time meeting with department leadership, senior managers, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders, fire union staff, and several other stakeholders, business stakeholders throughout the community. As part of that effort, we determined that there were areas that we needed to look at, and so we started with the initial areas. Tonight, we're going to start with the Human Resources Department assessment conducted by the Meriwether Group. With over 25 years of experience in human resource services across disciplines, record success as an executive level human resource consulting firm, and substantial studies in government and economics, the Meriwether Group has the comprehensive knowledge and experience needed to analyze one of the most critical functions of our operations. Directly following their presentation, we will have our overall organizational assessment presented by management partners with clients from across the nation, including the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and KCATA. Management Partners is known for building their work on the principles of knowledge, collaboration, proven methodologies, quality work, and action. Both of these consultants have been able to talk to staff and key stakeholders directly about what works and what needs improvement throughout our organization. And they've provided recommendations for how we should proceed. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gail Meriwether to present our HR assessment, and Mr. Byron Marshall will follow with our organizational assessment.
Good afternoon. My name is Gail Meriwether. If there's some familiarity, for more than 20 years, I was the Area Vice President of Human Resources with the Arthur J. Gallagher Group. The Unified Government has been a client in that we completed your compensation study as well as the BP year. So then I am prepared tonight to have a discussion regarding what we've found. My partner at the Meriwether Group is also uniquely qualified to assist me with this project. Graduate of St. Pius, also studied at Harvard And part of that concentration was government and economics. So my colleague Jillian brings a unique perspective in this process as well. My MBA is from the University of Missouri. Can we advance the slides? The next one too, please. Just for conversation's sake, my clients have ranged from the state of Rhode Island to small food banks in California, but I've also spent a lot of time in the Kansas City area doing similar work. So I just listed maybe 10 that would be familiar on both the Kansas side and the state of Missouri. And I did leave off the BPU and I did leave off KCATA. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jillian.
If we could advance to the next slide. As we focus on the objectives in engaging in this human resources audit, our objectives were fourfold. We started with the examination of compliance with established regulations. So specifically centering state and federal laws that provide a framework for the work of human resources. We looked at Department of Labor that has established rules around employment. We centered items such as fair labor standards, anti-discrimination laws, documentation requirements, ADA, HIPAA, et cetera. Our second objective was to explore how to better serve management and employees, recognizing, of course, that the function of HR is to focus on the people side of the business. So discerning if managers and employees were getting their needs met through the functions of HR. Our third objective was to examine work processes. So from job postings to orientation to promotion to separation, with every step of the HR processes in between. And our final objective focused on establishing early warning systems to spot problems and identify issues. Issues where we foresaw either deficits or opportunities in forms or processes that were leveraged by the UG, we brought to the attention of the UG and provided documents in the written report to support facilitation of that function. If we could advance to the next slide, we'll center our methodology, which began with conducting individual interviews with both leadership and human resources staff. Our goal was initially to engage with all of the ACAs in the UG. However, because of a recent vacancy in one of the roles, we also met with leadership within various departments throughout the unified government. In relation to HR staff, we spoke with each person that was responsible for a primary functional area, be that FMLA, workers' comp, benefits, et cetera. We also reviewed employee-related documents as well as employee files. At the time that we began the audit, we would like to note that the UG was subject to a cyber breach. So all of the up-to-date documents were not submitted to the Meriwether Group because of that timing of the breach. With that, I will turn it back over to my colleague to expound on the findings.
Thank you. As we go through this process, this will be a high-level overview, and the expectation, I am hopeful, is that if it requires a deeper conversation, that we'll be able to go into a different session to have that, because it does deal with the employees. So with that, the very first thing that I want to say, what we will address are the areas of concern. And you will note that the areas of concern that we have highlighted are the basis, the foundational functional areas of human resources. So as we go through this process, what I want you to think about more than anything is that if the foundation isn't firm and strong, it is going to be difficult to have an effective human resources department. So with that, starting with the hiring process, there's some delinquencies in the documentation, the processes themselves. The process can be streamlined. Documents are not where they should be, which is in human resources. All tests, questions, etc., must be deemed reliable and valid through a human resources process. The employment application needs to be updated. The Equal Employment Opportunity Survey needs to be updated and consistent with the Department of Labor, and not inquire as to questions that are inappropriate and could be deemed illegal. Job descriptions need to be updated. There needs to be job descriptions for every position instead of using job classifications that we at Arthur J. Gallagher developed for the DBM methodology. The UG needs to also have job descriptions. We also need to make sure that all jobs are in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act, i.e., if the job is non-exempt, it needs to be identified as non-exempt and employees should be paid overtime. If the job is exempt, then it needs to be identified as exempt. Should you advance the slide, please? In addition to that, policies and procedures, they need to be updated, clear, and in a unified format that everyone can have access to so that there's clarity about the policies and procedures as it relates to the UG. The employee files, they should every file should be within the Human Resources Department. Files should be separated. General employee files, access to those should absolutely be given to those folks on a need-to-know basis. All of your medical, health-related files from what the employees may have selected as their benefits, those should all be in human resources. Not a manager, not a single manager should have those files, whether locked or unlocked, in his or her possession. In addition to that, all hiring records from the time that you place an ad until the time that position is filled, all of those documents should be maintained within human resources. I-9 forms should be up to date and accessible right at the spot. It shouldn't be that we need to look for them. They should be available. In addition to that, payroll and finance does not function under human resources. It is through finance. So we didn't have the opportunity to see those records, but HR needs to have access to those records to ensure that pay has been doled out consistently across the organization. The next slide, thank you. Compensation. The UG absolutely needs to conduct a pay equity analysis. And we can discuss that further. The performance management system, the one that you currently have is obsolete. And I understand that it hadn't been used anyway. It's imperative that there is some sort of communication with the employees as it relates to their job and expectation and how well they're performing the job, even if it is not tied to pay. In addition to that, the termination process, we need to understand why people stay, why they leave, and where they leave to so that we can understand the competition and understand what we need to do to ensure that we can maintain the talent that we need. The Equal Employment Opportunity Plan, there are clear objectives established by the Department of Labor that we need to be consistent in going through that process, especially given that at the UG, we've had some experiences with external entities and lawsuits. We need to be consistent in how we maintain this information so that we can get on the path that's deemed most appropriate. The next slide, please. Through this process, it is one thing for me to go through and look at all the paperwork along with my colleague to have those conversations. We also did a service quality dimension. In that, we asked all of the folks that we had the opportunity to interview, what was their experience dealing with HR? And that was imperative because HR has one client, and that client is every employee of the UG, from the managers to the person who greeted us when we came in every morning through security. And what we understood from the leadership is oftentimes it's unreliable, the answers to their questions, what they will get back, inconsistent, sometimes unresponsive, not always accessible, especially within a timely manner, and sometimes can be inconsistent as it relates to communication. So then it was imperative for us to understand the level of know-how within the HR function. So then One of the things we want to make sure is that you're staffed appropriately to handle the complexities of the UG. It is a complex institution. It's not like you're just manufacturing shoes. You got fire, police, public works, finance across the board. So the staff within the HR department, and I think there's about 18, is appropriate. What we want to make sure that we have a more extensive view of is the level of human resource education, thank you, as it relates to understanding employment law and the functionality of those key basic functions within the HR department. With that, going forward, if we could shore up just those basic components, then I think that HR function would be better equipped at helping managers to understand how they need to handle employee-related issues, and the employees can feel better about getting the responses that they need in a timely fashion from HR. And when we say HR, it's not just the Human Resources Department, it's everybody. And I think that would be my last slide. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Byron Marshall. I'm with Management Partners and the Institute for Excellence in Public Administration, Public Service rather. I'm joined by Scott Byers. I'm joined by Scott Byers, who's with the same firm. We were hired to do a high-level look at the organization. A high-level evaluation of the structure and functions with the goal of identifying possible recommendations for optimization. And I say high level because unlike the audit that was done of HR and the one that's being done of finance, we scanned. We weren't able to delve deeply, but we scanned to identify hotspots, things that you need to look at more closely. And we also, that we believe you need to look at more closely. And we also collaborated some with both HR, the HR auditor, as well as finance. The folks we assigned to this project, there are 4 of us. All of us have been city managers or county managers. Scott is an engineer. I've also been a city manager. I'm going to say it briefly, and then if you want to ask specific questions, you can do that. I don't want to go over an hour. We have another former city manager who's also been a finance director and a public works director, a third who was a county manager, public works director, and I've been a city manager, budget director, and economic development director. So all of us have over 30 years experience. All of us have looked at governments, have run them, and seen similar issues, and we think we can make recommendations to you. The data we reviewed included your budgets, your long-term financial plan, your annual, the CAFRs, strategic plans, general plans, contracts, et cetera. We also interviewed staff. We interviewed the mayor, interviewed the administrator, we interviewed the 4 assistant administrators, and virtually every department director. We did not interview the HR director. I did interview the finance director. We did not interview legal or community corrections or aging. We just didn't have enough bandwidth in the dollars that we had to be able to do those. But we think we got to the core of your departments. So this is a large and complex organization, as you know. And any organization like this will have opportunities for improvement. You've got about 25 years of experience as a consolidated government. And this is a good time to kind of stand back and look at it and see what adjustments can be made. There are like 5 areas that we noticed under our major observations. One is that the structure doesn't doesn't focus on synergies between like organizations. So if you look at the way the assistant county administrators are set up, there's no set of services that are interrelated. They're all over the place. And we'll see that in a couple slides from now. And that happens over time. It can happen over time in any organization. It happens sometimes because I may have experience in economic development and I worked with another director and I was successful at it. So I get put in one set of organization, one part of the organization, and I'm given other assignments that complement my particular set of skills. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the best thing for the organization. You are at a point now, though, where you can stand back and look at that and realign, in part because you have 2 vacant ACA positions. And we think as we go through this, we'll show you why we think you ought to realign. The second is there's a lack of strategic planning. You have some strategic plans, but you don't have an overall strategic plan that's being focused on and being managed. We were unable to find, even in the plans, specific criteria and metrics for success. How do you know if you've achieved what your goals are? And when you're allocating your budget, while you have a performance budgeting system, that's what the intent is, there's some elements that still need to be implemented with it. The commission has said you have about 7 goals, and those goals are things you think that you ought to focus on. But there's no, from what we've been able to determine anyway, metrics that say, here's how we know when we've achieved that goal. Here are the incremental changes that we're going to make each year to move towards the achievement of that goal. Here's what each department is responsible for doing in moving towards that goal. And therefore, they're being allocated a certain amount of money to achieve those things. And each director is judged based upon their achievement. Each individual employee, all the way down to the lowest level employee, needs to know how what they do fits into the overall goals of the city, of the combined government, rather. We don't see evidence of that at this point. Your IT department is an Achilles heel. You recognized that recently with your cyber attack. There doesn't seem to be an overall IT plan or strategy. It's not coordinated. There are other groups that have IT functions that may actually endanger your IT integrity. You don't have cyber insurance. You've already spent about $1 million trying to recover, but your premium would have been probably less than that. You've made some substantial improvements in the last 8 weeks, but you still have some challenges, I would say. There are a lot of opportunities for consolidation of functions and for increased collaboration. And we'll talk about that as we get into this. I'm not going to stay focused on that. And then the organization could also benefit from more effective communications, both internal and external, having a communications plan, a corporate communications plan that speaks to different audiences within the government and then the citizens so that they know what's going on. You've got a lot of pieces that move in that direction, but it's not organized in a coherent fashion that we could see. And then there's not a culture of continuous improvement. And some of that can be had by saying, here's where we want to go, and then allowing employees to help you figure out how to get there. And giving people the opportunity to make mistakes as long as they don't keep making the same mistake over and over. You're not going to make change without mistake. So setting the environment where people can have a safe space to make recommendations to managers all the way up to the county administrator. So we think you should look at restructuring the way the government is organized, the different portfolios under the managers, the assistant county managers. Develop an internal and external strategic focus from what you've decided is important as a governing body down through your budgeting process and then into your departments and your evaluation process. Develop a culture of continuous improvement and coordinate and communicate.
Mr. Marshall, if you could just speak up a little bit into your mic, please.
Okay, that has been a problem my entire
That's-
career. Sorry
okay.
about that. All right, is that better?
Much better.
Sorry. Okay. So the UT functions are misaligned, and that exacerbates the fact that you don't have a strategic focus. And communication and collaboration issues exist. We think you should conduct an evaluation of the placement of functional units within departments and departments within the UG to support efforts to properly align functions in the organization. So undertaking a targeted organizational restructuring to take advantage of synergies and improve coordination. An example, you've got planning, development review, community development. No, that's not engineering, but it actually, you have all your vacant lots under one unit. Thank you, the Land Bank Authority. They're not coordinated. The processes are not coordinated. So, and this is not a fault of any of the staff because I think they're earnest people. If you run the Land Bank Authority, you had to create a market to sell land, to find people who want it. That's the first thing you had to do. But once you create the market and now people want it, how does that relate to your affordable housing program? How does that relate to your commercial development program? How does that relate to your economic development program? How does it relate to your master plan? So all those things need to be coordinated. There's a synergy there that could be had. And it's not like you don't do cross-functional things or synergy. You had a program called SOAR, which moves across various departments and is successful. At least it seems to be successful. Now, I will say, again, we were up here at 30,000 feet. We didn't go down and investigate each and everything, but everything we heard sounded like SOAR was something that worked. You dealt with safety issues, you dealt with blight remediation, and those are cross-cutting. So this is your current organizational structure. First thing we noticed is that the span of control for the administrator is too broad. There's no way one person can effectively, I shouldn't say that. Most people would find it challenging to manage that many people. Now, I've managed large organizations. That is hard. And the other thing is the manager has both an internal focus, should have both an internal focus and an external focus. So while they're responsible for the day-to-day operations to make sure things run smoothly, they're also responsible for looking out 5 years and 10 years to see where the UG should be going, working with the state, working with the school district, working with BPU, working with the various planning organizations to make sure that they're coordinated and aligned so that the UG is moving ahead expeditiously and everything's coordinated. And the dollars that are being spent, all the tax dollars, are being leveraged properly. So right now, you have an assistant county administrator who's over public health, human resources, technology, performance and innovation, 311, and the appraiser. There's little rhyme or reason to that structure. Public health probably should be over with health. I mean, it just seems, I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm just saying there's, or with Park, all the human service type related things, aging, those things need to be kind of aligned under a person who really understands those things. And also under the goals and priorities that was set by the commission, so that you have outcome measures that are assigned to each of those clusters, each of the departments, and you know when the budget is allocated, what they're supposed to be producing. So rather than going through all of these, we're going to show you what we think would be, well, I'm going to go back just for a second. Attributed direct reports to the administrator. She now has 11. There should probably be no more than 5 or 6. Align the internal functions under each ACA. So maybe under one ACA, you have finance, all the internal services, finance, human resources, technology, GIS mapping, the appraiser, and the clerk. They could also support the Elections Commission, the Register of Deeds, and the Legislative Auditor. Those are not management responsibilities, but coordination responsibilities. Align public safety under one ACA, police, fire, emergency management. They would also work with the sheriff, the district attorney, the district court, and municipal courts. And then align health services, human services, aging, community corrections, coroner, public health, parks and recreation, and then align the economic and community development activities, community development, planning, public works, economic development, and the land bank. You might want to consider, now that you have these 2 vacancies, to advertise for ACAs who actually have skill sets and experience managing those type of operations and showing success in doing those things. You might also consider having one of the ACAs actually be a deputy, being responsible for keeping things moving internally while the manager is dealing with some more of the external things also. And the other thing we recommend is you have a lot of key projects that we're going to talk about that are necessary to move the UG forward, that you create champions under these ACAs to take a major project under each of the areas and drive it home. You have a lot of projects, but it's not clear who's driving them to completion. So somebody needs to adopt them and be responsible for them. So this reflects what we just talked about. Aligning like services under ACAs, and it would then move to, once they're aligned, making sure that there are specific tasks and outcomes that are designed to be completed by them. I'm going to turn it over now to Scott, who wants to talk about a couple of other items.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about management systems and strategic planning and those type of things. So the organizational system is really about putting things in the same function. So it's an alignment of function. So you get people that are working in the same, public safety. Those folks are all setting and reporting the same person. So they're all solving those same problems and sitting next to each other and reporting the same person tends to gain a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness in what you do. So on top of that, we're recommending that management systems be put in place and really come to the forefront to manage those projects and manage your priorities throughout the organization. So you all are elected by the people to do the people's work. And so when you set those priorities, Byron mentioned there were several that you identified, but let's go another step deeper and really begin to manage the directives and the priorities and goals of the electeds to permeate the entire organization. And how you can do that is really through management systems, so that the commission identifies 6, 7, 8, whatever your priorities are. The administration gets together and they set goals and processes of how those are going to happen and begin to allocate funds to do those things with expectation that there's going to be this benchmark, that this will happen in 6 months, this will happen in 7 months. And so they begin to develop an expectation and as well as a measurement of how what progress is being made toward that goal, whatever it is. So in each of these functional areas that the organization has, there are management systems that throughout, from the commission to each individual employee, they will be able to see how they get to participate in doing the work of the people that you are leading them to do. So that's the overall view of that. And Byron gave you that, but this is really an important part of that. And it's an array of policies and practices that as he said, as you begin to have those, you begin to work with the employees on how they go about it. And they come up with better ideas that they've never been able to be heard before. Now then they're being heard and their ideas come to the forefront. More efficiencies, more effectiveness comes forward. And so it comes from both directions. The commission sets here's what we want. And the employees say, here's how we can do it. And here's how we can do it the most effective and efficient way. And so those come together to then produce the best outcomes. Well, how do we know what those are? Well, we know by management systems, how effective we are at doing that and how our progress is in doing that. So that's the overall of the management systems and that accountability. So you break that down. First of all, a UG-wide strategic planning. We heard a lot of employees and managers talk about budget driven budget that's by managements and goals. And but we really never saw that connection. As we asked questions and asked for documents, we didn't see those connections always being made. And sometimes when they were made in the budget, there wasn't an accountability piece that came back and said, here's how we're doing on that. And here is the mid adjustment we need to make in order to hit our goals. We didn't see those type of management functions on the backside of those strategic plans and the budget to make that happen. So these are multi-year strategic plans, big goals, big directions that you're setting for the people's business. Need time sometimes to do that. Sometimes you can do it pretty quick. Sometimes you need multi-years. So that's the reason they're multi-years, they're integrated, and then they are throughout the entire organization. So we're recommending that you design and implement a consistent business plan and management system that all employees understand, that everyone understands, that the public understands, and use the process to annually have measurable objectives and then celebrate success. When you measure for success, you get to celebrate. And sometimes in government, it seems like we're always defeated. Because you never get enough done, because you never have enough money to do everything for everybody. But if you set priorities, if you say, this is what we're going to do this year, and then you accomplish that, you can celebrate it because you've done what you said you could do with the money that you have. And then you celebrate that, and then you can move on to next year, and success builds success. Once you have a year or two of success, then you begin to expect to get that success each year. So it really is that. So that's the strategic planning. Specifically, we really want to see, and Byron again talked about this a little bit, economic development strategic plan. There are a whole lot of plans out there. Through Mark, through different plans that the unified government had. And again, there's some good plans. We didn't really judge whether they were good or bad plans, but what we didn't see was a priority of what plan is to be accomplished now and what has priority over others. So if you've got 20 plans and it takes $70 billion to do 20 plans and you're trying to accomplish them all, you're probably going to get none of them done. So it really takes focus to look at that and to prioritize and make those hard decisions. This is the one we're going to do this year. These are the 3 we're going to do next year. And this is how much they cost. And this is how we're going to allocate the monies to do that. And then we're going to do those. And so it's very difficult to do that when it comes to economic development, because you want all the economic development you can possibly get. But you really have to have a strategic plan that looks at what are the opportunities? What are the assets that you have? The land bank's a great asset that you have. How do you want to use that to move you forward in 2022 with the opportunities that are now and the constraints that you have within your budget and all the other things? So how do you do that? City I just left, retired from, had 12 years there. We decided that we wanted to be a regional hub and that we wanted to attract sports type of functions to our region. So we made those decisions. We allocated some money. The voters voted a tax, and we did several things with that. And over time, over 4 or 5 years, we had some new facilities, and we did become that in that amount of time. I'm not saying that needs to be yours. It shouldn't, but you have opportunities. I see some that look pretty good. And really it's about making those priorities to move your city forward. So we're recommending that you develop and implement an economic development strategic plan in coordination with Wyandotte Economic Council, Mark, McKenna City Housing Authority, and DPU. So find out what's unique about you, find out what your priority is, and find out what the opportunity is in the region to take advantage of that. And there are lots of opportunities right now moving forward. So that's really this piece of it. Again, we had the organizational piece that functions. This is about direction and alignment and bought-in alignment and accountability on management systems and strategic plans that get the things that you're elected to do and the priorities you make throughout the entire government to every employee to accomplish those goals.
So the next piece is the communication strategy. Communicating in an organization is complex anyway. One of the things that we found when we first came is that people didn't seem to understand what was going on. Now, some of that was because there had been a change in leadership. They didn't know what to expect from the administrator. And there was also some change at the ACA level. So as we talked to folks, we shared with them what we knew, and then we talked to the administrator about some of the things we were hearing. For example, some people said they couldn't fill positions because they thought the positions were frozen. We saw an email that said positions not frozen, but that had not trickled down to everyone. I think what helped was she had some kind of town hall meetings to begin to explain to people what was intended and also what was intended by these audits. Because if you don't share information, people fill in the blanks. And we were here apparently to come in, cut all the department heads off and roll them down the street. It clearly wasn't our role, because what we're saying is we want to hear from them what are the things they think are important to improve the organization. I don't think we met anyone who wasn't dedicated to working in the city. Lots of people talked about being dots. I had no idea what a dot was before I came here. And I'm glad I know now, because people were very proud of that. Some of that is engendered by the fact that you have to live here to work here. But some of it is these people have worked their whole lives and they go home to their neighborhoods and go to the grocery store and people ask them questions about what's going on down there. Having been a city manager and having gone to the grocery store and had people asking me questions about all manner of things, sometimes I wish they wouldn't, but that's the way it was. I knew they were my neighbors. They wanted to know what's going on. And that made me feel good about working in the city where I grew up. Well, I think the same thing happens here, but I think what had happened was people began working in silos and there wasn't as much communication as there might have been. And some of that, people get busy, and you go through COVID, people working remotely, and I think people just kind of lost touch. So we think that there needs to be continued effort at improving communication, especially between the executive leadership team and then down from them to the people who report to them, people that they manage. Because if people know what's going on, it's easier to keep everybody on the same track. But I will also say, you've got to figure out a way to get people out of silos. So sometimes the lack of communication can be detrimental. An example would be, we talked to the IT director, and he was concerned about a new work from home policy that was going to allow people to communicate directly into your system. He had just dealt with this security breach. He was not involved in the development of the proposal and of the policy. Well, that's not good. So somehow those two, the person who are developing the policies, need to think about who it's going to affect, and all those folks need to be in the room. Or at least if they're not in the room at the same time, which actually is probably the most efficient way, they certainly need to be able to sign off on the documents. A similar issue is with Workday. That's your ERP. This is a very important project that affects the government. It is not clear in talking to many of the people who have to implement it that they fully understand it, that they have the staff resources dedicated to be able to implement it once it goes into effect. And that's kind of important. One of my major failures in my career was doing an ERP. And it was a failure in that, one, we rushed. We rushed because the payroll system was about to collapse. Because when I got there, that's the situation I found. So I pushed it forward. And then we decided, well, if we're going to do payroll, let's do everything. Let's do the big bang. We're going to do it all and try to get it done in a year. A huge mistake because people weren't ready for it. It is very complex, and it's much better and you've got to train change. For what we are hearing is that there was process mapping, which is important to do. But the question is, once it's mapped, that's the current state, where there are process improvements, the future state designed so that you're not doing the same thing, the same bad thing faster, but you're improving it. Now, we see some evidence, like in payroll, that they went through, they thought about the process, they're making some changes, and that's a good thing. But it's not clear, even though we were told process mapping was taking place in all the departments, that it actually did. Because as we talked to the departments, many of them said that didn't happen. So there's a disconnect between what we were told and what the departments are realizing. That portends a potential problem with your Workday implementation, which is now scheduled for October 1, go live. It was June 1 or July 1. And even that, I'm not suggesting that you change that date. I just want to make a point. When you were planning to implement it at the middle of the year, July 1, you would have 6 months of data from 1 year and 6 months of data in the next year, once it was up and running. So July to December, and then the next year you'd have a full year. Now you're only going to have a quarter. It can be done. The question is it as useful that way? Now that's me. I'm not your Workday consultant. Your HR, your finance people may have a whole different point of view. I don't think so, though. If I were them, that would be my concern. In talking to your IT person, he doesn't seem to have the resources in place to be able to implement Workday when it comes up in 10 weeks. So again, with the stripes on my back from having screwed one up, I would suggest you look at this a lot more closely over the next few weeks. And I'll say I screwed it up because I was in charge and I let it happen. So Madam Administrator? One of the things that we focused on that Scott was talking about was developing an economic development strategy. And I want to talk about that not just as it relates to economic development, but as it relates to your long-range financial plan. So you have a structural deficit in your budget. The structural deficit for the general fund budget of the city portion. Your expenses are growing much faster than your revenues. You can't fix that by just cutting. Your taxes are already higher. I don't think you can raise revenue that way. So one of the things and there are some kind of stopgap one-time things that are being done, moving people off of the city onto the county where it's appropriate, using your rainy day fund or your budget balance. That's a one-time kind of thing. Long run, you can't continue doing that. So there needs to be, when we talk about planning, there needs to be a serious plan for how you're going to fix that problem, because it's only going to get worse over time. I've heard people talking about, well, one of the issues driving this, of course, is employee pay. Not to say employees don't deserve pay, but as you look at that, it's driving a lot of your costs, probably 65% of it. And that's not unusual, that's almost everybody. But the question is, how do you get in front of that? Part of it will come from looking at those 300 vacant positions, and as part of your budgeting process, determining what it is you have to do by statute or law. So you have to do it. What are the things that are difficult to change? You know, taking health services away from people. And then what are the things you can change? And those things have to be prioritized and hard decisions have to be made, or else. That's all I can say. So strategic planning for where you want to go long-term, but part of it has to be looking at your current financial situation and planning how to fix that. And then the economic development strategy helps you develop a broader base of taxes and helps you attract more people to town. So you've done some really great things up at a racetrack, but there are parts of your central city that need to be focused on. And that involves working with the schools too, because without schools, you can't attract people. You have to have a housing policy that's multi-generational and mixed income. And you got to have services, and transportation. So I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna end on communications again. So there have to be regular meetings between the executive leadership, and they need to continue, and they need to focus, in our opinion, on consistent agendas related to these management plans. If you have a management plan for health, you have a management plan for transportation, if you need a management plan for economic development, but somebody needs to be bird dogging those things to make sure they're getting done. And you got to talk about them every week, or at least every other week, and ask, what have you done? What are the things that are impediments? What else do you need? So what's the next step and how much money do we need? I'm going to turn it over to Scott to talk about development review.
Want to reiterate what Byron said about the structural deficit. It is a critical piece that you have to solve. Mayor mentioned it earlier. It is absolutely critical to the health of the city going forward. If you don't solve that, nothing else that we say today matters. So you know that, but it just can't be said too many times. Next couple of slides I'm going to talk about just as a preview to them. We we have not delved deep into these, but this, as we were looking at the processes and talking to people, these seem like things that were critical and ones we wanted to just talk a little bit about. We don't claim to know all of them. You know, it's something that that obviously administration needs to look at closer and test some of the things and ideas that we are talking about. So the development review process is extremely important because you're dealing with developers, you're dealing with people who want to invest money in your city. And so if they have a positive experience, they might want to spend some more money in your city. That's good. If they have a negative experience, they may want to take their money and never come back and spend it in other places. So, and I think a lot of the folks we talk to have an understanding of that. And I think there's been a few attempts to try to look at how to improve that development process. But it is a complicated process. It's one that cities struggle with throughout. I struggled with it when I was a city manager. Developers are, want to have it streamlined, and they deserve to have their questions answered, and that deserves to be very transparent to them. And we need to do all we can to make it transparent and to make it as easy as possible to do business in your government. But it is complicated. It involves various departments. It involves various other agencies, and it's legal. Can drive some of the things that it has, but at the heart of it, it really is customer service. And I think, again, I think you all understand that, and many of your folks understand it. But when you have all of these handoffs, it can be, as much as you care, it gets on somebody's desk who happens to be on vacation, and then it goes to the next person who happens to be on vacation, and all of a sudden you look up and it's been 3 months, and you haven't got back to somebody that's wanting to spend money in your community. So you really can't have that. So we talked a little bit about a one-stop shop. Seems to be a buzzword, and does solve some of the problems. So that might be something to look at and optimize the process of improving development review process and reduce time and increase the transparency. The Acela software is coming. We think that is a solution that makes sense and one that needs to be implemented. You're almost to the finish line. Need to push that over and begin to use that and open that up so developers can see where things are, know who has it, and can follow up and move forward. This process just still needs some work, and we think it's really critical to the economic development. And so we think you need to look at that. Again, the preface to these things going forward is we didn't look deep, things and premises that you need to test and your administration needs to test. So the next one is the capital project delivery. We talked to Public Works, Board of Public Utilities, private utilities, and it seems like as we talk through some of those things, there's limited coordination on the capital project delivery. They gave some examples of they went through and resurfaced a road, and then a few weeks later, they came up and dug up portions of it to do water line crossings. And so that's concerning and kind of points to potential lack of coordination between groups. There was oftentimes I asked the question, what is the funding source of the different types of capital improvements? How do you fund your water program? How do you fund your street program? Those types of things. And most of the time there was no answer at all, or don't know if that exists. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm given a number and I just go with that. So understanding where money's coming from sometimes is important in maximizing that money or tapping into other monies. So we always, our capital improvement program was always budget constrained and time, we call it budget constrained and time certain. So when we put a project on, we said, this is the budget, you will live with it. And here's the time frame and you will deliver it. And that is sometimes difficult in government, but it's a lot about expectation. And you'll be amazed at what you can do if you set that as your not just a goal, but a measure of the effectiveness of those who are in charge of making sure that they deliver that. We've done some, Management Partners has done some studies, and they have found that when a capital project delivery program is managed and uses management techniques such as critical path and budgetary constraints, that it's at least 10 up to 20% more effective. So you save that money. If you save time, you almost always save money. And so it's good on two fronts. So that's our recommendation, that you develop a CMIP strategy that's aligned with all of your plans, and then that the delivery is tracked and accountability is held in order to be budget constrained and time certain. The last area I'm going to talk about is engineering and utilities. Talked with several of the engineers there, and talked about water and stormwater. And as we talked about the different engineering groups, it appears that there is a possibility of perhaps combining them all into one engineering group, maybe two engineering groups. Might be a way of saving some money, and perhaps also a way of attracting people. Sometimes engineers don't want to do the same water work all the time. They'd like to do some water work, and then maybe some street work, and then maybe some building work, and sometimes that's an attraction to engineers. Sometimes it's not. Some people like to specialize, but there's also some real efficiencies that come when somebody's designing that water work, and then the person designing the street work at the design stage, and they're talking about their projects. And then they say, oh, well, we need to make sure we do the water work and tear up the road before we go around and resurface it. So that's an opportunity of consolidation. Again, those things need to be tested and looked at, and hear what are some of the difficulties of combining those. Integrating Board of Public Utilities into the unified government looks like it would also be a big goal, and one that is big to chew off, but there also could be big benefits and efficiencies and effectiveness by exploring such a huge structural change. Management of water, wastewater and stormwater, maintenance repair, again, a lot very similar in skill sets and those type of things. Combining those gives you flexibility and some efficiencies and effectiveness in doing that work.
Before I talk about information systems, first of all, there are only 4 more slides. We're almost done. But before I talk about information systems, I wanted to say one thing about the budget. It wasn't that directors didn't know. They knew how much money they had. They weren't necessarily sure how they got that amount of money or how the priorities were set. It seemed to us, that the budget process to them was almost mystical. And having been a budget director, I can understand how that happens. You have a certain amount of time, you have a certain amount of money, you start getting it done, and say, here's what you can have, and you move it along because the boss said get it done, and you got to get to the council. But that belies this whole notion of outcome-based budgeting. Because if it's outcome-based budgeting, then the priorities were set and everybody knows what they are. And you vie for your part and you say, here's how I'm going to get my part done. And here's what my cost of services are. And you can justify it. And then you move it along. That doesn't seem to be the overall practice. That's not to say the budget people are doing a bad job. It's not to say that the departments are doing a bad job. It's just the culture needs to be changed. And if you're going to have outcome-based budgeting, then you really need to have all the elements of it in place. And there are lots of cities that have been doing it for a long time, cities and counties. Charlotte-Mecklenburg County is one that comes to mind. They do an outstanding job, and they've been doing it for 20 years. So every quarter or every month, the commission or council would get a report saying, here's what public safety did moving towards their goals. Here's what public works did moving towards their goals. And then every year during the budget, you can decide whether you want to move some goals higher or lower, because you know what your goal is. You want your response time on ambulances to be 3 minutes, or police response time 5 minutes for a particular kind of crime. So you set those things up and then you are measuring against that. So I didn't want to give the impression that folks didn't know anything about their budgets. That's not what we were trying to say. Saying they don't fully understand how they're calculated, when the bonds are going to be sold. And maybe they don't necessarily need to, but to the extent that you understand how the whole process works, it makes you a better manager. That's what I found. Information technology. So I've talked about some of this. So I'm just going to focus on the recommendations. So you've got functions of IT in various departments, including the DA, the district court, the sheriff, et cetera. And again, I'm going by what the IT director said. We haven't had a chance to validate this. And we suggest you bring somebody in to validate it. That, like the court, for example, has staff, and they have the ability to get a certain amount done. But if their staff is not there, they take vacation, then IT has to figure out how to get that work done. It is not clear where the intrusion in your cyber attack came from. But what it is clear is that to the extent that you have things in the cloud and not individual servers, that makes it more difficult. And everything in those departments is not in the cloud. I'll just say that. You clearly need to get cyber insurance. And one of the things that is necessary to do that is multifaceted authorization, multi-factor authorization. And you're now at about 90% of that. You were at about 30% a few weeks ago. So you're moving ahead. And that's one of the major things you have to have in order to get the insurance. But I've not been able to find out from anyone I've asked so far how much it's going to cost for the premium. I would think that would be a high priority, and somebody would figure that out since you've already spent over $1 million. So to try to recover. Your fleet manager was a joy to talk to. He's an interesting guy. I just say. And one day he wants to be mayor. So he said. He didn't say anytime soon, Mayor. He said one day down the road. You do need to do a fleet utilization study and look at consolidating fleet operations under one operational unit. Now, I know this is going to cause some angst because the biggest place that you could possibly save, well, one place you could possibly save is combining maintenance of fire trucks. I've fought with many fire chiefs over that. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. But when I won, we saved money. It really depends on what you're doing in the maintenance. If it's just PMs, if you're not replacing engines, transmissions, and you're sending that out to Cummings or somebody anyway, I'm not sure. The firefighters back here probably hit me in the head with axe. But that's something I think that needs to be looked at more closely. It doesn't work all the time in all the places, but it's worth looking at, particularly when you're talking about trying to reduce the gap between revenues and expenditures. You've got to look at pretty much everything. There's probably a sacred herd of things, not just sacred cows. Outsourcing the fueling function to reduce liability. I think that's one of the things he recommended. So you don't have fuel stored, that basically you contract with somebody to store it for you in case of emergencies. You be clear on the cost, where it is, you don't have the liability and the maintenance. So it seems like a great idea without further exploring it. On the surface, it seems like a good idea. Like many cities, your take-home car policy needs to be updated. So this doesn't seem to be a real rhyme or reason to it. Procurement and purchasing. You have not updated your procedures since 2007. That's enough right there. They need to be looked at. He looked at P cards. There's something like, I believe there were like 2,000 entries a month. That's high. We asked how often they are reviewed. And I know finance reviews them and purchasing reviews them, but they're one or two people trying to review several thousand. That's pretty difficult to do. So we recommend, A, you go back and look at the policies overall, that you conduct real periodic audits, even if they're spot audits, that you look at your P cards and look at the merchant category codes and restrict them further. One of the things we heard was that the procurement director or purchasing director was pulling her hair out because an elected official, who she didn't tell me and I don't want to know who it is, not you, was not a council member, a commission member, was buying alcohol for parties or receptions, which she believes is in violation of your policy, but she doesn't believe she has the power to enforce that. The power is you just don't pay it. But would be my way of dealing with it. So it needs to be looked at more closely, and it may require some political intervention to make it easier. Last 3 slides, ongoing initiatives. You have steering committees for your ERP Workday, and that should continue and be pushed harder and involve more people, particularly the end users. Implement Excel and Project Docs so you can get your economic development on track. And there's a government space assessment that's supposed to be done for potential reorganization and update the countywide master plans. We talked to your planning director, and he thought was some good ideas. Some of these things should have been, area plans and master plans probably should have been done a long time ago. But you can't move ahead without getting them done, and they need to be coordinated with any long-term master plan, an economic development plan. Okay, last slide. So you've got these assessments that are going on in finance and human resources. You heard from human resources already. The primary things we'll tell you about finance is, again, there's a structural problem, particularly with your general fund for local government or for the city. The budgeting process needs to move into the next phase, which is to have metrics. We also think that you ought to continue these assessments through the entire government. Not all at one time necessarily, but department by department, looking at all the processes, mapping them out, improving them, looking for opportunities to coordinate and to streamline. Because in doing that, you also will probably most likely will find savings. You can look at the opportunity for combinations of departments. That doesn't necessarily mean that you lay people off. You may reassign folks, and you can, through attrition, create some other change. Again, once you prioritize the vacant positions that you have and look at 4 things with these processes. 1, look at your business processes to identify areas for improvement. 2nd, look at the management systems, the things Scott was talking about, to ensure staff understand them and use the policies and practices. You also need to look at your leadership capacity to pinpoint those folks who are effective and those who are not effective. And those who are not effective, maybe you can help them through training you buttress them with somebody else. It's possible for somebody to be really good at one thing and not good at something else, and maybe pairing them with somebody, it works. Sometimes it's time to separate, but you would determine that through looking at the capacity. And then look at the overall organizational health by identifying improved business practices, prioritizing goals, and determining the best allocation of resources based upon those priorities. That's it for us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. This time we'll take questions from any of the commissioners. Commissioner Bonner.
Thank you, Mayor, and to both of the teams that brought the information. It's good to have it. Some of it I think is concerning, but I like that it helps us build a path forward in all the aspects. I'm kind of leaning in on the organizational assessment. Will we receive the full written reports from both of your entities? And when we've done these in-depth studies in the past, those have even been put on our website for public consumption. So, but I would like to have the full reports from both of the entities. When we talk about implementing some of the recommendations that you've brought for us, it strikes me that a lot of this work is for our county administrator to not complete alone, certainly, but to lead. And I think maybe some of what I'm saying might be in the form of questions. So maybe you could come back to the microphone. Some of it's probably for the commission, possibly by way of policy adoption. But just in that general two-part statement, would you agree so far?
Yes, I think that there are two parts. One is direction to the administrator to develop the metrics by which your goals and priorities are carried out. And then the other part is you have to set the goals and make sure that the right ones based upon what you know and what your constituents have decided are important.
That answer kind of leads me to my next question, which was, do you see a strategic planning session or multiple sessions as our next step for
It is.
kicking this off?
It would be one of the next steps, yes, ma'am.
And what would be some of the other next steps?
To the extent that is necessary, and I don't know what your procurement policies are. You're trying to hire a new administrator. If a recruiter came to me and said, why don't you go to, what do you think about going to Wyandotte? I would want to know, so what's going on in Wyandotte? Now, I've seen these two reports and then I'll see the third one. What are you doing about it? Am I going to come in and have to start from scratch, or is something going to be underway? And so I'll have a landing pad. So I think you need to figure out what you need to get done in advance of a new administrator, and also figure out what kind of administrator you want, what their skill sets are, what their personality is, what their background is. You know, are they a facilitator? And I think they would need to be able to work with the government. Are they open to working with the community? I think they would have to be. Are they good at budgeting? They would have to be. Are they a good strategic thinker? I think they would have to be. Those are some of the things I think that you need to figure out before you hire the new person.
And I'll say this, and you don't have to answer it. I guess I'm speaking to you and the group here. It's interesting that you bring these points forward, because you could have an administrator candidate that doesn't want to come in and pick up the playbook that somebody else just made maybe they want to create that playbook from brand new. I don't know. I'm really just kind of speculating out loud. Would you have a thought on that one way or the other?
You know, there's no one set, one way of looking at things.
Okay.
Scott and I might look at this differently.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind having a playbook,
Okay.
but I would want to look at it when I got there and evaluate whether or not it was done well, right? Say, these are the things I think were done well. These are the things I think need to be done differently. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
If I may.
Thanks.
I think part of the issue will be, as you hire someone new, do they come in and start from scratch? Or have you already put the foundations in place so that they can move the organization forward?
That's exactly.
My opinion is you've got some pieces in the foundation that are just broken that needs to be fixed. The other thing I wanted to say, don't be afraid of or uncomfortable or nervous about those big terms, strategic planning, because it sounds like it's a lot of work. One of the things that we have done at the Meriwether Group is to leave you a framework of a performance management system, creating job descriptions, identifying job objectives. I've done it across the US. I've got them and I'm prepared to just give them to the UG so that there's something that they will have going forward. So I don't just have a bunch of rhetoric here. I've got forms and formats that I'm giving to the UG.
Thank you so much.
I'll wait just in case there's another question.
I did talk to Scott just for a second. Both of us feel like coming in knowing that the commission has already decided they're going to make some changes, that gives the administrator a sense that there's commitment. And if you know it's a 3 to 5 year slog to get it fixed, then he or she will know what they're going to be evaluated on each year, what they need to accomplish. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
And whatever he or she is evaluated on every year, that needs to be pushed down so that we don't have folks just coming in every day lacking direction about what they are to achieve. And that again is the performance management system that I'm giving to the UG. I'm retired. I just play pickleball. So I've got time to give these pieces away.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Cheryl, for doing this. This was something that I think has needed to be done for a while now. So I'm very excited. I will say for the potential organization structure, I like it. It's creating that synergy, like departments together, working together, rather than mix and match. Because I know currently one of our ACAs has a large amount of important departments underneath them that they're in charge of coordinating. And it's all just a bunch of different departments. There's no real continuity of what they actually do together. So I thank you for that. And I thank Commissioner Bynum for your line of questioning. I do believe that we as a commission, along with Cheryl, I think we can work together to create that foundation for our next administrator. I look forward to it. This is something I know our community has been waiting for a while. And so I'm ready to work with you.
I believe Commissioner Townsend, or I'm sorry, Johnson had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you also to our interim county administrator for having these presentations, and also to the both groups that provided the information. I've got a lot of questions, but I think I'm going to just ask this one. Both analyses provided a critique of our departments. What I'm curious about is, were there any, I guess, positive milestones that you uncovered that we can build off of with regard to bringing into our organization a new administrator. I will agree. I think I heard this said in the last presentation, there's always an opportunity to change culture. And I think that this provides probably as good of a time as any to be able to do that. So I'm just wondering, were there any positive things that you all were able to observe in various departments as you went about your process? And thank you.
Yes, sir. So there were several bright spots. The police department was a bright spot. Aspects of public works were bright spots. I don't think we talked to but maybe a handful of people who weren't really excited about the work that they do and weren't dedicated. I mean, so you've got people who really want to do a good job. I talked about one of the programs that was underway, SOAR, and that ACA who was running it has left. But what she expressed was, what she described was a program that worked well across various silos. So there are a lot of bright spots. I think part of it is just adding leadership and a vision and an accountability system to help people.
Thank you. I guess to the mayor's, I'm sorry, Ms. Merriweather, I'm sorry.
I also too wanted to add, absolutely, the brightest spot going through the functions of human resources were all of the people that we had the opportunity to talk to. The fire department has worn me out, but it's because they've just got a lot to say. Oftentimes, people will not share because they're nervous and they're uncomfortable to do so. And everyone was candid. But I also want to add, if the foundation is weak, I could put the prettiest windows into a building. It is still going to crumble. So at this point, there's a lot of work that has to be done within the HR department. And I'm not leaving them bare. I'm giving them what we believe it is that they need.
So the discussion I heard from both you all as well as the other group sounds like it's kind of touching on what the mayor's talking about in terms of tightening our belt. And that it leads me to believe that there's a real thought that there are positions that are not filled right now that could be eliminated. Is that correct? Am I understanding that? I just kind of want to cut to the bone here. I mean, not cut to the bone, but cut to the chase here, so to speak, to kind of figure out which way should we go.
Well, as I said earlier, we spent a very small amount of time talking to departments. So we took a picture. Somebody needs to watch the whole movie and really understand what makes sense and what fits your priorities. You're elected to represent the people, and what are your priorities? So when you cut, it doesn't mean that you can always, sometimes if you can cut and keep the services the way they are, that's a no-brainer. But to the level that you have to do it further, then you have to cut, and you have to cut services as well. And so that's a prioritization process that people are elected to do. And that's what you'll be asked to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. It's been my experience that many, if not all, audits are not only conducted and discussed and reviewed, then shelved. And I would hope that we would work to continuously review these documents, implement and embrace the findings. It's critical to this local unit of government. It's critical to the leadership here, but more importantly, it's critical to the community. And so I might suggest, Mayor, Commissioners, instead of seeing this work product shelved, that I'm going to make a motion that first of all, Madam Administrator, is this an actionable item this evening? No. For information only. Thank you. If well, it's an actionable item, I'd make the motion this evening to begin the adoption of the work product and recommendations. We can ill afford to wait any longer. It's time. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank y'all so much. I know this took a lot of work to take place. We did not vote necessarily to authorize the budget for this, correct? We did not. Okay, so this was kind of under. Okay, just wanted to make sure because I didn't see that on any agenda. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Either of you can answer because I do have some questions. Were you all given our budget and our charter to review? Okay, do you all have any thoughts? And the only reason why I say that is because one of the hard things about kind of implementation, and y'all are city managers, y'all know this, right? Like there's the administration piece, right? Which is the technical side. And then there's the political will piece. There's the ability to compromise, the ability to put stuff on the agenda, the ability to vote things through. And so do you all have any thoughts on that particular piece of our charter?
So each of us has been a city manager. We have enough sense to stay out of political fights. So we're not going to do that. What I would say to you is that one of the things that we find a little surprising, challenging, not surprising, is that you operate as you're a unified government, but you operate as two separate budgets. And I understand some of that is because you have these other cities that are in the counties. But I think you ought to look to ways of being less separate and trying to make the operation work smoothly. And I don't know, we didn't look at the legal aspects of that. We weren't called upon to do that. But that may be something that you might want to do, see if there's a way to further consolidate.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. The other question that I have, is I know that, are these assessments still ongoing or are they complete? Is report good to go? Is the book closed or is it still open?
As it relates to HR, I'm done. I've completed it. I've got the information for you all. I also want to address the question that you asked as it related to, you didn't see a budgeted item for this. Because I've worked for Ms. Harrison Lee of the city of Gardner, I did not charge her what Arthur J. Gallagher would have charged her. I charged her what the Meriwether Group would charge her because I've lived in this community long enough to appreciate the unified government. In addition to that, and you'll hear me say over and over again, because I know you need to say things 15 times before people really understand it. If you can get the foundational pieces of HR together, like right now, there are EEOC claims that are just about $2 million, of which I think maybe $1 million have been paid out and we're sitting being ready to pay another. All of this could be done far less than that. And then the issues that we've had as it relates to employees and managers, most of that will go away because the expectation from the employees will be identified in a performance management system. Job descriptions will be clear. You'll have an HR department that's responsive, who understand employment law and can help them through the process. And we can relieve some of the work that the attorneys are having to do around those kinds of things. And y'all can do more around contract and bringing economic development into the UG.
Yeah, awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you. For the organization assessment, are you all done with, is the book closed on that as well?
Yes, we're done.
Okay.
Our recommendation is that you have other people look more deeply into the areas we identified.
Okay, gotcha. The only reason why I bring that up is because I do think that as commissioners, I'll just speak for myself, but I think others maybe would agree. I think we would have really loved to have gotten interviewed by you all. There's a particularly unique perspective that we offer within our particular districts, knocking on doors, talking to people, hosting town halls. And so that's why I asked if the book is closed on that. But thank you so much.
You can address that. And then I'm gonna sit down. I promise. I'm gonna sit down. It's dark. The doors are still open for you all as elected officials because the strategic planning process, as you guys are hired to do a job, you are elected because you knocked on doors and said, this is what we want to do for the UG. And that needs to be a part of what gets pushed down for the employees to do through that strategic planning process. So I may have missed you in understanding what goes on in HR, but when it comes to moving the organization forward, that's exactly when you need to have that conversation. So we say the community wants this because they spoke through the elected officials to let us know. And then the mayor and the assistant county administrator, interim county administrator, this then are their top 3 or 4 priorities. How do we get that done through the departments within the UG? So we're not done with you yet. Okay.
Commissioner Ramirez? If I would, Commissioner Stites.
Stites, District 7. Thank you for the presentation, both of you, all of y'all. It was enlightening. I will tell you, so I've been here just 7 months now. And so this question may not be directed directly at y'all, but when was the last time since the inception of the unified government 25 years ago that we had a top-down evaluation of our departments?
Never.
Okay. That's okay. That's what I was looking for. And I too agree that with Commissioner Burrows in the sense that we don't need to take this information and file it on a shelf and it never get explored and we don't act upon it. We do have that opportunity now that we had professionals come in, give their advice. We need to evaluate that advice, take heed, and take action. So I appreciate it, and I think that we have a unique opportunity to, I'm not going to say right the ship, but I do think that we can get this thing not listing to the side so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarron. I'm sorry. I guess you had a motion. I'm sorry. Okay. I'll just follow up. Thank you all so much. Appreciate the presentation. I think it was very valuable, just not for this staff and commission, but for the community to see. I advocated hard that we needed to have an outside, independent, unaffiliated audits of the unified government. Not only now, but we need to continue down this path. We have awesome employees here. I've worked with them every day. I worked 32 years here with a lot of great people. I think some people forget that. I've been exposed to the organization when I started down in the basement here, the sub-basement of City Hall back in 1987. And now I'm the mayor. And that's nothing to brag about because we have so much work to do. I'm not here for me. I'm here for the people. And that's what this is about for me. So I do encourage our administrator moving forward that we continue a deeper dive and that we look at all the departments that have been recommended. And I agree with Commissioner Burrows, is that what I've seen is a merry-go-round to nowhere. And some of you have heard me say that when you talk about all these master plans, listening tours, community conversations and presentations, and they go absolutely nowhere. I think we're at a crossroads in the unified government. We have a real opportunity to be about the change that this community has demanded that they want to see from the unified government. You can hold your applause, please. The other part of this aspect is outside of the employees that we know do a great job here. There is a culture that I've been exposed to and have been involved in. And that culture is some of what you've seen tonight. And those are the things that this commission is going to have to work with. I've heard a lot of the commissioners and we've got to work. Let me remind our commissioners, and not everybody, We have got to put whatever differences we've had, personal, professional, and do the work of the people. This mayor came out front on day one and said, work with me, meet with me. And I encourage all of you to continue to do that. Those of you that haven't canceled your meetings with me. I'm here, I'm available. My team is here every day and we want to work. We have got to put whatever differences aside. We've got to move these recommendations forward. The future of not just Wyandotte County, but residents that have demanded better from all of us is at stake. And when you talk about, just from my experience being here over 32 years in various aspects of leadership, there's a lack of diversity. You've got people in high positions of decision-making, making decisions for this community, but not culturally connected to the community or even a desire to work with the community. We've got to change that dynamic. And it can be done responsibly. Not that everybody doesn't have value, but when you talk about people that are making leadership decisions for this community, that is something administration has to look at. We need a diverse, educated, talented, and connected workforce inside the unified government at the top leadership positions. So leadership is really key when I talk about that. We also got to have a level of accountability. What I've seen over my 32 years when you talk about the culture is it bothers me when you have an imbalance of this experiment of the unified government, and I'll call it that. I think a unified government is better than a divided one. We've come a long way. But when you talk about the form of government, I have issue with that. And some of that issue was brought out tonight. We've really got to work on creating a unified government where staff, for once, is accountable to the elected body, to include this commission and the mayor, because this commission and this mayor are accountable to the people. And the people vote us in office because they think we are running this town. And in reality, the tail is wagging the dog. And when people call the mayor's office, when people call for commissioners, and when commissioners ask for things, and not everybody, but there should never be a time when any commissioner, when any employee gives more excuses than they do solutions. There should never be a time when an employee tells any commissioner or an elected official what they can't do as opposed to how do we make things work and find solutions. Those are my biggest issues we have. That's the imbalance that we need to address. A lot of these issues, we put together 7 committees, and I thank those commissioners that have been involved in these 7 committees to address some of these issues. Harold Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, he's working on trying to streamline the process so businesses can go from shovel ready to development in a way that is responsible and streamlining that process. Commissioner Ramirez is working on efficiencies as well as criminal justice reform. We're also looking at our unhoused and impoverished population to enhance services and improve what we do for them. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And those task forces were designed with one thing: collaboration. Commissioners, community, staff, mayor's team coming together to find real solutions to real problems that we know affect the lives of real people every day. Actionable solutions, not just talk, but action, where recommendations can be brought forward that can generate results that this community wants to see. So I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. This mayor's team is willing to work with this commission, staff, and more importantly, our community to do just that, to work on these problems and find solutions. I've always been a collaborator, and I'll say it again. I'm not here to play politics. I won't. And if you think I am, think again. I'm not here to do that. I'm here for one purpose and one purpose only. That is to get things done for the people of Wyandotte County that are sick and tired of being sick and tired of what they've been seeing come from this unified government. And I was one of those employees. But again, I'd like to say, for all those employees that do a good job, thank you. You are valued, We appreciate you. We know you're working hard every day. It's the culture of this organization that we've got to address. That's what we need to focus on, because once we start working on the culture and getting these policies and practices and procedures in line and bringing qualified people for these positions, that's when change, in my opinion, begins to start. So there was a motion on the floor. This isn't an actionable item. If you want to repeat that again, Commissioner Burrows.
Mayor, I had clearly stated, Commissioner Burrows at large District 2, I had clearly stated that I would hope that we wouldn't shelve this study, and it's important enough. There's been time and energy invested in it. And if it was an actionable item, I would have been more than happy to make the motion this evening. Because I truly believe if we don't take action tonight, it will be shelved. It will be forgotten about. In my experience, that's exactly what's happened in my 26 years in the Kansas House. Those audits were conducted on an ongoing basis, and many of them were shelved and forgotten about. And same mistakes were made over and over again, and we can ill afford to keep making mistakes. But Mayor, I would just challenge each and every one of us to be mindful that the information is before us and very forthcoming, depending on how far we want to drill into it. But I stand ready to do my part, Mayor, to lead.
Commissioner Townsend. Commissioner Townsend, you can.
No, thank you, Mayor. I appreciated the information brought forward tonight. It's already been stated this is not an action item for a vote, but the difference is how and when can action be taken. And so I think Commissioner Burrows' point is that this is not to be forgotten. I would just caution us about being hasty and taking a vote on something when this is not for a vote, but I support in him and the intention in looking at this further. The other thing that, as I listen to this, to keep in mind is what this would mean to achievement of what's been proffered tonight as we look for another administrator, and how those candidates would look at their ability to come in and work to achieve some of these things that may have been offered, and what this is really going to look like. So that was just a comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just for clarity, Commissioner Burrows, in speaking with him, just like me and some others, we're just encouraging our administrator to continue to deeper dive into this organization and continue these assessments based on the recommendations from the individuals that you have here today. So thank you so much. As a result of this meeting, we are going to need to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. I'll need a motion.
I move that the commission go into executive session until no later than 10 p.m. to allow the commission to discuss confidential matters regarding specific employees, which are private personnel matters related to specific non-elected employees as permitted by the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that staff designated by the county administrator be present to participate in the discussion, and that we return in open session at 10 p.m. here in the commission chamber located on the first floor.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Motion to Commissioner Burrows at large District 2, motion to go into executive session.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Stites,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. The motion carries.